Good afternoon, and thanks for joining us for today's webinar, 5 Barriers to Effective Training Programs and How to Crush Them. My name is Jessica. I'm on the marketing team with BizLibrary, and I'll be the host for today's session. Before we get started, I want to go through just a couple of housekeeping items. First, what you should see on your screen. On the left-hand side of the screen, this is the webinar viewer, so this is where you'll see the content that we're sharing with you today. On the right-hand side of the screen, this is the control panel, so this is where you can join the audio portion of today's webinar, and you can also communicate with us through the question box. The default mode for the control panel is for it to collapse. If you want to open the control panel back up, simply click the orange box with the white arrow in it, and it'll expand for you. All of today's attendees are in listen-only mode. You can join the audio portion of today's webinar either through the teleconference line. You can also listen through your speakers. If you're going to listen through your speakers, I recommend either using a pair of headphones or a headset to get the best audio quality. We like to keep things pretty informal, so if you have any questions or discussion points or comments throughout today's session, feel free to send those over through the question box that's located within the control panel. I like to weave the questions in as it relates to what we're discussing in the webinar, and then I'll also leave some time at the end for Q&A. I am recording the webinar today, so I'll make a link to the webinar recording, as well as the slides and follow-up information available on our website after today's session. So that's bizlibrary.com/bizblog. I'll also send a follow-up email that'll include a link to the recording and the slides as well. If you'd like to download the slides before we get started, I put a link to them in the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You should have also received a link to the slides in the reminder email that you received this morning. Today's session has been approved for 1 hour CE credit for all of you HR professionals attending. I'll make a link to the completion certificate available at the end of today's webinar. I'll also send out a link to the completion certificate in that follow-up email that you'll receive within 24 hours. The most important thing is the activity ID number or the program ID number. That's what you'll need to record with HRCI. If you'd like more information on certification or recertification, I encourage you to visit hrci.org. If you need any help on how to submit these sessions for credit, there's a link on our page at bizlibrary.com/webinars that'll give you some instruction about how to submit them. Again, my name is Jessica. I'm on the marketing team with BizLibrary. I graduated from the University of Missouri-Columbia with a degree in journalism. I've been working in the training and development industry now for about 5 years. I'm very active in social media, so I tweet on behalf of BizLibrary at BizLibrary and also at my own account at Jess L. Petrie. I'm also pretty active on LinkedIn, so I like to share a lot of articles and discussions around training and development, human resources, and marketing in general. So if you're on either of those social networks, would love it if you'd reach out and connect. Just let me know. I got a couple of comments that the volume's low, so let me know if it is any better. Again, if you're joining through your speakers, it usually comes across better if you use a headset or headphones. And you can also adjust it through the audio setting within the control panel. All right, so presenting with us today is Chris Osborne. Chris is the VP of Marketing for BizLibrary. He's also worked in a consulting capacity with a Paris-based leadership development consulting firm where he helped organizations design and implement leadership and executive development programs. Chris has been performing learning, development, and training functions formally since 2000 and informally for organizations since 1987. Prior to Chris's move into the business sector, he practiced law in the areas of labor, employment, and business litigation for over 12 years. He graduated from WashU School of Law with honors in 1987. Chris is also active in social media, so you can find him on Twitter at Chris Osborne STL, and he's also on LinkedIn. So I'm sure he'd love it if you'd reach out and connect as well. Just to give you a little bit of background on BizLibrary, BizLibrary is a leading provider of online employee training and e-learning solutions. The award-winning content library contains more than 7,000 online employee training videos covering every business training topic. So that includes communication skills, leadership and management, sales and customer service, compliance training, desktop computer skills, and more. Additionally, BizLibrary's LMS or learning management system and social learning technology platform help HR and training leaders improve and manage employee learning. All right, so enough about us. I have a quick poll question to learn a little bit more about the attendees with us today. So you should see the poll pop up on your screen in just a minute. So this first poll, what is the biggest barrier you have faced related to learning and development on the job? Is it A, a lack of resources and time, B, lack of motivation to change or improve, C, training doesn't make an impact, D, performance isn't improved, or E, lack of support from senior leaders?
Hey, Jessica, how you doing?
Hey, Chris, I'm great. How are you?
Good. Now, we know, by the way, that it could be all of the above or some combination. We just not want to know what the biggest barrier is. So just kind of curious here. So, and you're being very quiet today.
I just took a drink of coffee, so it won't last
I
too
caught you.
long.
I caught you. You're expecting me to
It's one of
fill the gap there. I'm sorry
right.
about that.
It's one of those afternoon coffee kind of days, as most of the country has probably gotten a little chilly where you are.
Oh no.
Like
Yep.
what?
Normally you don't have to worry about me yakking, but there I let you down. So sorry about that. Well, this is always an interesting, we haven't done this webinar in a little while, by the way, so I was kind of curious to see what kind of reaction we get to this poll. This is kind of tracking sort of what we get, with the last couple times we've done this. If I remember correctly, we have two answers that tend to dominate, and the same two are dominating the responses today as well. So be interesting to see how this all plays out as we go through today's session with the questions that we get today too.
Yeah, I mean, I think last time, if I remember correctly, the majority actually said that training didn't make an impact, which I thought was kind of surprising considering the audience, but then you said it wasn't so surprising. So it's slightly different, I think, than it was last time we've done it. I think we did it in August. But anyway, so go ahead and close it out and share the results from today's attendees. So we've got 37% said lack of resources and time, which isn't surprising. 31% lack of support from senior leaders. Both of those are very closely related. 16% lack of motivation to change or improve. 10% training doesn't make an impact, and 6% our performance isn't improved.
Yeah, and this, again, truthfully, you could make a good argument, and this is where I was going with the last time we did this. These are all so interrelated in many ways. I mean, if you think about it, if the training doesn't make an impact, are your employees going to make the time to do it? Are they going to be motivated to do it? If performance isn't improved, it's obviously not going to make an impact. And if all of those things, reflected in what's happening, how in the world do you get support from senior leaders? I mean, it really, in many ways, a lot of these issues are almost catch-22s. You can't get support from your senior leaders if you don't have improved performance and can prove it, but it's really difficult to get improved performance and be able to prove it if you don't have support from senior leaders. So it's really one of the most difficult aspects of learning and development programs is the catch-22 aspect to it. Anyway, it's part of the puzzle, the logic puzzle that I find most invigorating about the field, but it's also one of the most frustrating as well. So this will be fun to get into today.
Yeah, so and I think, Chris, one of the main things is if you can have a senior leader that supports it at the strategic level. So usually with organizations, when it's a challenge of lack of resources and time, they're able to implement something if they have that champion up at the top. So I think that's a really important aspect of it as well. So there's kind of three high-level things that we hope that you take away from today. Chris, I'm going to pass the ball over to you. You can run us through those, and we'll keep going.
All right. Let's make sure I'm sharing my screen effectively here, and let's get now hopefully I've done this correctly and you see the slides. Is that right?
Yeah, we're good to go.
You saw me slide them over there, didn't you?
I did.
Okay, well, sorry about that. And now they're not. Now I've got it.
I promise.
Okay, I apologize to everybody. I'm a technology dunderhead here. So you do see the correct slides now, right?
We are good to go, Chris.
Okay. Well, I'm using two screens. I usually use an iPad and my monitor, which I find easiest. I finally am back to having a computer with two screens, and it's taken me a minute to get going here today. So I apologize for that. So now we're ready to rock. All right, so we have three high-level objectives for today. We want to explain the strategic framework for effective learning and development programs. And this ultimately turns out to be kind of baseline mission critical. Unless we get the right strategic framework in place, no matter how well we execute on many other elements, it just never works right. So we have to get that right. And there are barriers. We see 5 barriers over and over and over when working with our clients. So we're going to share these with you. And we found a couple of really interesting articles that identify these similar barriers. So we're going to talk about these, some interesting ways to get at those. And then we're going to talk about, and this is going to be tied into the discussion about the barriers, we're going to suggest some best practices that you can adopt immediately to overcome these barriers to learning and begin to move your employee development programs forward pretty quickly. So let's lay out what's happening out there. Every day, 2.5 quintillion bytes of data get created, so much that 90% of the data in the world is being created in the last 2 years alone. That's the IBM Understanding Big Data, Analytics for Enterprise class, head-up and streaming data. Now, I don't really know how much 2.5 million quintillion bytes of data is, but it's a lot. That's staggering. The world's so different. I mean, it's sort of like, Dr. Evil, when he says $1 million. How do you comprehend a quintillion? I don't even know how many that is. Over 6 billion hours of video are watched each month on YouTube. That's an hour, almost an hour for every person on Earth. We're in a world that is so radically different than any that's come before. And we're seeing this rapid movement to video-based communication in shorter and shorter and shorter chunks and pieces of information coming at us. It's affecting us in so many critical ways. And we have to begin to shift our thinking about the way we train and develop our employees. And as learning professionals, we really have to come to grips with a new relationship with our employees. This is some interesting, a graphic that illustrates some interesting research conducted by Robert Kelly at Carnegie Mellon University. And this is really an illustration of what's happening in this for knowledge workers. In 1986, according to Kelly, a knowledge worker held about 75% of the information they needed to do their job in their brain. They knew it, 75%. By 1997, that percentage had shrunk to 20 to 25%. And by 2006, it was less than 8%. So now step back and think about that for just a second. Now, how's this for a weird paradox? Knowledge workers have less knowledge in their brain than ever before that they need to successfully perform their jobs. When I really started to think about it in those terms, I really just kind of had to start laughing. It's sort of like, so what does a knowledge worker, what does that really mean? And what it really hit home to me was the fact that being a knowledge worker doesn't really have much to do with what we quote unquote know, but it's how we access, process, and then use information. It's how we use knowledge. It's how we use data and what we can find. That's really the essence of what knowledge workers are about today, how we connect with each other and share information. It's not what we hold between our ears, because quite frankly, going back to those stunning statistics about the amount of the quintillion bytes of data, all the information we've created over the past couple of years and the billions of hours of, video that are created and watched every month, it's impossible. It's impossible for any individual to keep everything that you need to know to perform effectively any place. But what we can do is we can learn to use the tools that we have at our disposal to access information, share information, make ourselves and our colleagues a little bit smarter. So when you think about training programs and you think about those objections, does it work? Is it effective? Are employees motivated to participate? Will senior leaders support us? A lot of us, and I've done this before myself over the course of my career, if we just put a great program together, the employees are going to love it because it's going to be so cool, and the technology is going to be great, and the courses are going to be exciting, and they're going to be interesting, and every one of them is going to be really cool, and they're going to be just really well done. And that doesn't work that way, does it? Employees don't just flock to our training. You know, Michael Rochelle, he's the Chief Strategy Officer at Brandon Hall Group. And by the way, I get a chance to talk to Michael later today. He's a great guy, fascinating thinker, great speaker if you ever get a chance to hear him sometime. He's just got this really interesting perspective. And I love this comment that he made at our client conference in 2013. He said, in a world of learning and development where complexity is the enemy, organizations need a simple and nimble approach to deliver high-quality learning anywhere, anytime. Now, I love this quote for a whole range of reasons, but the essence of the quote is this: complexity is the enemy. Now, think back on those objections that Jessica identified for us in the poll question, the 5 objections: lack of resources and time, lack of motivation to change or improve, training doesn't make an impact, performance isn't improved, lack of support from senior leaders. And think of how many times when we've run into those objections, a big part of the problem was exactly this. The solution we've got in front of our employees or in front of our organization is too complex. We've made it so multi-layered and so multifaceted, so cool, so to speak, that it ceases to be really effective. It ceases to really speak to the problems that we really are trying to overcome. So here are 5 barriers, common barriers that we see over and over and over when we talk about, you know, effective training programs. And if we really begin to dissect these, you're going to see over and over and over the theme repeated that complexity is the enemy. Jessica, if my recollection is correct, we found a really great blog post that mentions these barriers in pretty interesting way, some rather provocative and strong language, if I remember correctly. But if you don't mind, if you could post the link to that blog post, I'd really appreciate it as we move into this. So the 5 barriers are efficiency, and we'll explain what that means in just a minute. Yeah, Charles Jennings, thank you. And Jennings is, by the way, a really great thought leader in our space. The status quo, you know, sometimes it's just easier to do nothing. The conspiracy of convenience, we'll talk about that. That's actually one of my favorite barriers. A training mindset, which I have to confess is there's some really provocative language in Jennings' post, which I take exception to, but the idea there is really good. And a lack of manager support. And ultimately, that one becomes, you know, at a foundational level, really a critical one. Jessica, before I dive into each one of these one at a time, do we have any questions or comments that we should address now, or are we ready to keep moving?
Chris, we're good to go. I think we can go ahead and dive in. Again, just if you have questions, comments, send them over through the chat. We like to weave them in as it relates to it, but for now, we're good.
All right. Yeah, we do like to pick up comments as we go. It's a lot more fun, I think, to have an interactive group rather than us just talking away. But we are certainly happy just to talk away, too. All right. Efficiency. Well, this is the first of the 5 big barriers. And so step back and think about this one. And again, I'm gonna do a mea culpa right out of the chute here and tell you that over the course of my career, and I've been involved in employee development for a long time. I'll put 3 longs in there because it's been a while. I have been guilty of participating in, on some level, each one of these and putting each one of these barriers in front of employees, my organization, and my teams for a whole range of reasons. Most of them half-baked or wrong, I'll be candid, but they're easy to fall into is the point I'm trying to make. We have been taught, many of us have been taught to fall back on these. And so a lot of what we're going to talk about today is requires us to shift our thinking a bit And if you'll go back to the business case we laid out, this shift in the world, the data that's coming at us, the volume of data, and what that is doing to the needs of our employees. And going back to that very interesting paradox between the knowledge worker and how valuable and important they are, and how much knowledge we actually have between our ears to do our job effectively. It is a different looking employee than the employee who we could train effectively, because we could put 75% of what they needed to know inside their ears. Okay? That's a different training challenge, which leads to this. Efficiency. We have typically focused on what goes into a training program. In other words, we're going to do this much classroom training, we're going to provide this much e-learning, we're going to send people off-site for this much, this many courses or this many workshops, or whatever the case may be. And what we have to begin to do is begin to think differently and focus on what's coming out of our efforts. Focus on the outputs rather than the inputs. And we have to embrace effectively using all of the technology tools at our disposal. It's not always easy to do, but those of us who aren't always readily accepting of mobile technology, tablets, this is how our employees are accessing the world away from work. And guess what? They're accessing the world at work as well. And we might as well be a part of that conversation. When we can meet our employees on their terms, it works. It works really, really effectively. I mean, the trick is we really have to begin to think about, sort of why we're doing things. We had a great quote from a participant in a webinar. Randall said it like, I'm going to use Randall's words because he said it a lot better than I can. He said, training is the what of learning, and education is the why. And that's really where we have to get to, is the why. Then in terms of our content selections, and this gets back to efficiency, what's the quickest and easiest way to get out of our, to help our employees perform better? Do we build our content? Do we buy our content? Do we borrow our content? And we have to really begin to examine carefully the structures and systems that are in place. And remember, complexity is the enemy. We want to remove the barriers between employees and learning. Jessica, I see a good question, I think, from Mary. Is that right?
Yeah, it's a question/point of clarification. So by efficiency, do you mean around cost effectiveness, or is it efficient because it reaches a large number of people easily, or does efficiency really focus on outcomes, or is that around learning and changing behaviors? So a couple points of clarification.
Yes, to all of the above. Efficiency can be around cost effectiveness, because to be perfectly frank about it, when we're focused on simplifying the delivery of content and simplifying access to content, it can be more cost effective. It's not always going to be that way, but it can be. It becomes much more efficient because when we are focused on helping employees perform better and reaching as broad an audience as possible, rather than pulling 25 or 30 people into classrooms at a time and spending 3 hours talking to 25 people on something they may or may not need, that's not very efficient. On the other hand, if we have a technology platform that can reach all 500 of our employees when they need content on their terms, giving them the content that they want when they need it, that's a whole different ability to scale a program and reach people much more efficiently. And then finally, efficiency is a focus on outcomes, and it is around the learning and changing of behaviors rather than just what goes into it. So, yeah, Mary, you hit the nail on the head. It really hits all three of those pieces in different ways, but those are the building blocks of getting around this barrier. That's really how to do it. Okay, great question. Thank you. So, as you start to think through this, one of the things Cox Learning e-learning consultants, they've published a really great survey. Sometimes these surveys that you see out there, you'll see these, they're published and they make a big splashy press announcement. We had 316 people participate. Not so with this one. Cox got over 1,700 people to participate in the top learning solutions that they were expecting to see hit the marketplace in 2014. And look at this. Off-the-shelf content and video training content were the top two technology solutions on top of mind in the marketplace. Then learning management systems, then mobile. I mean, if you really step back and think about it, all of this is really about the market recognizing the need to get content to employees as quickly and easily as possible. So they're looking for systems to do it more efficiently and cleanly. Mobile, I'm so happy to see that mobile is finally, people are finally recognizing how important that is. And from our perspective, we need a kind of a mobile-first approach to delivering content to employees. I think that's incredibly important and a big win for your employees, ultimately, in terms of the learning. But I love the top two pieces. Look, it's about content. Content is king, and those were the two top solutions that the participants in that survey identified as, you know, most important to them. So this is a big piece of what was going on. So why would that make sense? Again, thinking back to this efficiency, why video? Why is video-based e-learning important and effective and ultimately efficient? Why does it help break down that barrier? Well, first, just in terms of cost, this is not difficult to understand. It's just reduced travel. The reach, we talked about that earlier. You can reach so many more employees with the same content, but you get it to them when they want it, when they need it. You know, then you couple that with mobile delivery, which really helps on the productivity side. When you can answer questions that employees are asking in the moment on the device of their choice, where they don't have to get up and ask somebody, or they can just look at a short-form video and then apply it right on the fly, that is the way we are accessing information away from work as well. Think about a typical Friday or Saturday night for your millennials. They're out, they're looking for a place to eat. What do? They pull out a smartphone, they look for restaurants, they're looking for Yelp, or they're looking, you know, for Foursquare, they're looking at some app, but they're trying to find something close by that meets their needs right then. Well, guess what? Our employees would love to have the same type of solution at work. They would love to have that same type of solution at work. Jessica, another good question popped up, it looks like.
Yeah, question from Vivian. So what's included when you say off-the-shelf content?
Well, Vivian, what we're talking about there are collections, like a library collection, that is content that other people have already produced for you that's ready to use when you buy it. So it's not content that you have to build that's custom built. So it could be a collection of Excel courses, safety courses, leadership development, communications courses, and Jessica is going to get a chance to talk to you a little bit more detail about that later. But BizLibrary sells an off-the-shelf collection of content as an example. I don't want to make the content of the webinar commercial, but that's what it is. It's a pre-built collection of content that you can use right on the fly. So there's a great study. You're going to have these slides. I'm not going to spend much time going over this, but the United States Department of Education did an exhaustive survey and study about how online learning actually works, and they found it to be efficient, adaptable, available, scalable, effective, and economical. And the thing that we are learning is through our years of work in this field is how true these 6 characteristics are, especially for small and mid-sized businesses. I mean, this is really totally true. The other thing that you begin to see with effective online solutions in terms of really driving efficiency, you know, this is sort of what that's where training is going today. They're characterized by, you know, smaller and decentralized departments, fewer managers, more specialists. We're technology dependent. Organizations are more collaborative. We need to be content curators and creators. So anyway, just an interesting way to begin to get at a different thought process for what this is about. And then again, going back to the idea of capturing content, how do you harness informal learning? you capture this content and make it available. There's a whole range of ways to do it, and there's all sorts of platforms to allow you to do this. But you make people accountable. You help them work smarter. Just a great platforms out there available to let you do these kinds of things. Okay, I want to jump into this second challenge, because this ultimately becomes a really easy one to fall into, and that's the status quo. Whatever the status quo is, changing it gives you the opportunity to be remarkable. From Tribes, it's Seth Godin, who's a thought leader in the whole social media world. Web 2.0 is one of the first thought leaders I ever ran into about social media. Great, great author, really provocative writer. But the status quo is really hard to change. Everyone at some level is resistant to change. Organizations, by and large, are naturally resistant to change. You've heard that phrase, if it ain't broke, don't fix it. And frequently, when things are going pretty well, it's easy to not see the underlying currents that are affecting our organization that may show up as really broken in 18 or 24 months. So status quo can be very seductive because it appears to be safe, but there are actually risks to the status quo. We risk falling behind other organizations, but there's inertia, risk aversion. It gets to be hard to do. And then, to be perfectly honest, we have this training and development laggards. The industry itself has contributed to this. We have industry leaders, manufacturers of products and deliverers of goods and services in this space who have been very slow to adopt to the technology and behavior changes that are out there. We have leading providers of platforms that have technology that isn't mobile friendly. We have leading providers of content who have thousands and thousands of courses out there that aren't mobile friendly. We have legacy learning management platforms that just don't function very well and meet the needs of modern learners. The training industry itself has contributed to this inertia of the status quo, and it's really a shame. But it really is like this. The Red Queen, through the Looking Glass, said this: it takes all the running you can do to keep in the same place, and if you want to get somewhere else, you must run at least twice as fast as that, but there's a reason to do it. We want to build a strong learning culture, and if we do so, we can outperform our peers. And these are the reasons to begin to challenge the status quo. If we establish a strong learning culture, if we move from point A to point B, we can be more innovative, 37% more productive. And look at that bottom line, the last one, 17% more profitable. These are the business benefits that we're passing up by accepting the status quo. By challenging the status quo, we begin to move closer to these types of organizations. And this is some data released by Burson, by Deloitte a few years ago that measured the difference between organizations that have real strong learning cultures and are really focused on continuous improvement, in other words, continuously challenging the status quo, as opposed to organizations that do not. So there's a reason to do it. And we have to take the lead in this. L&D, this is where we have to be. And I love this quote: to be an effective team leader, you need patience, strength, insight, tenacity, and courage. And if that doesn't work, doggone it, you bribe them with donuts. Do whatever it takes. This is really, really true. And John Kotter, who I still think is one of the greatest writers ever about change management, 70% of change initiatives fail. There's a whole reason for it. But the primary two reasons is we fail to take a holistic view of, one, the reasons for change and the barriers and obstacles to change, and we don't have a long-term commitment to follow through. So we have to get committed to this. We have to dive into it and make this a real priority for both our organization and for us as training and development leaders to drive this type of organizational change, this cultural change, to help our organization become more of a true learning culture devoted to continuous improvement. Okay? All right, so the third of the 5 barriers, convenience. And here's how, this is what the conspiracy of convenience sounds like. And I've done this. I have absolutely done this. Your sales trainer, your sales manager comes to you and says, we're not selling enough. Our sales numbers are off. We're underperforming. I'm frustrated. Chris, what can we do? We need sales training in the worst possible way. All right, Jessica, I'm going to put together a sales training program. We'll get started in a couple weeks. We'll have some workshops. I'll bring somebody in. I've got some online courses we're going to assign. We'll run through the whole thing in 90 days. Boom, we'll get it done. So you get it done. 90 days later, everybody's all excited. We've done sales training. We've gotten it finished off. And isn't that convenient? Everybody feels good. We got the sales training. We did the training the sales manager asked for. But nothing changed. We didn't improve anything. And that's how we've typically done things. I did things that way for years and years. We just threw training at a challenge or a problem because that's, when you're a trainer, everything looks like a training problem, right? And when sales is down, well, we do sales training. The problem is, I didn't ask Jessica, well, tell me why your sales are off. What's going on? Describe your current level of performance in these key areas, and let's talk about where you are and where you want to be. What's the difference between your current level of performance and your desired level of performance? And what are the key behaviors that actually drive success in sales? Is it negotiation skills? Is it skills on the phone? Is it written communications? Do we need better sales processes? Do we need better sales? Is it, in fact, a training challenge at all? Are we aligned effectively with the organization's strategic goals? Or is training just a convenient way to throw something at the problem and feel better about it? And that's what we mean by the conspiracy of convenience. And I've fallen into that. So in order to get over that, you have to do what I suggested there. You have to really find out what the root cause of the problem is. And this requires a systematic approach, and it just can be horrible and very frustrating to go through and exasperating to go through. But you have to do a root cause analysis to figure out exactly what the problem is. This is a relentless and objective pursuit of objective truth, and you just simply ask why. Jessica and I are going to do this real quickly, just sort of a quick role play. Here's the issue that we're running into is we want to retain clients at a targeted 95%, and we're only at 85%, okay? So why are we not doing that? Jessica, why are we only at 90% and we need to be at 85%?
Well, the reality is that we don't talk to our clients enough, maybe once every 60 to 90 days.
Okay, why is that a problem?
Well, we've learned that when we talk to clients at least every 30 days, they renew their contracts at a rate of over 92%.
Well, okay, so if we know that it works, if we talk to them every 30 days, why are the client service professionals only talking to them every 30 days? Why?
Well, really, the reps have too many clients. And even for those that have a manageable number of clients, they don't always have relationships with the key stakeholders at the company. Most reps have 80 or more clients. The optimum number is really 50.
Okay, so why is having a relationship with the key decision maker important? And does this have any bearing or impact on client retention?
Yeah, so actually we've learned that it's not just the frequency of the contact that matters. When we have a good relationship with the key stakeholder or the decision maker, the renewal rate is 92%. So when we communicate every 30 days and have a relationship with that stakeholder, the renewal rate is 96%.
Okay, so I want to go back to the other part of that comment before. Why do the reps have too many clients?
Not all of them do. We've recently had turnover, and we expect to add a new rep in about 30 days. 60 days, the book of business should be balanced and manageable for the entire team.
So why do we not have good relationships with the decision makers at each and every client?
Well, the reps of the group are not adept at relationship building and establishing strategic partnerships.
And there you go. We've gotten to the root cause. And we did that by me probing Jessica, asking why. And it turns out there's two problems, aren't there? One's a training and development issue. We need to teach the reps to build strategic build the reps to build strategic relationships with the decision makers. But the other is a systems problem. We need to get somebody hired to reduce the workload, but we got to the root cause of the problem. If we had started off by just doing customer service training, we wouldn't have changed the trajectory of that at all. That's why you do a root cause problem. You ask why until you can't ask why any longer. Okay? Jessica, you've got a wonderful case study to go through. This kind of gets back to one of the objections we talked about. Well, we don't have time for training. And this is a really creative, very interesting way one of our clients got around this.
Yeah, so if you look at the idea of the barrier of convenience, so it's really twofold. So there's the idea that it's convenient to throw training at a problem and hopefully we'll feel better and maybe we'll get a solution to it. But there's also the idea of convenience in our employees' work lives. So how do we embed learning into the workflow? So many times you hear we just don't have time for training, or we can't commit the hours, or we can't commit the billable hours of training. So this is a case study from a nationwide dental insurance provider. So this is targeted to their call center employees. The biggest challenge with call center employees is that they're constantly taking incoming calls, so it's really close to impossible to get them to do any sort of training while they're on the clock. So they've come up with this idea of tag training. So one call center employee is off the phone for like 5 to 10 minutes to do a short training video. And they choose videos that are entertaining, but they also have a key takeaway. So it's a break for the employee, but then they're also learning something new and developing themselves. So once they complete that course, they then tag their cube neighbor, and then it's their turn to take some time off and take a course, while the first employee then gets back on the phone. So they carry that game throughout the entire call center, and once they've all gone through the course, they spend some time to discuss it at the end of the day. So it's an opportunity for them to develop, and then they're also given that little bit of break in between kind of the monotony of taking calls all day. So it's kind of a creative way. It's only limited to your imagination. This is just an example of a group of employees that can't take time away, or they're very limited in the amount of time that they can devote to training. But again, don't just be boxed in thinking that it has to be kind of just one thing. You can really think of ways to embed it if you have some of the tools and resources.
Yeah, it's a great story, and I love the creative way that they did that. It's just a wonderful example of somebody not getting, tied to, well, this is how we, get training to employees. Really a great way to get at it. Okay, so the fourth of the fifth big barriers is this training mindset. Now, Jessica posted that link to the Charles Jennings blog, so I'm going to warn you in advance, if you do happen to read it, just prepare yourself, because some of the language he uses in this part of that blog is harsh, and I think unnecessarily harsh. I've been in training for a long, long time, and I happen to love employee training, and I typically really, really enjoy meeting people that are wired to train and help folks. This is a wonderful profession, and obviously I'm very passionate about it, and I think he kind of takes us to task a little bit unnecessarily, but I think the mindset challenge is appropriate, and I do think that we need to shift our focus away from the inputs, the traditional inputs. We're going to do this much classroom, this much e-learning, and focus instead on performance improvement. And this gets back to the case study that Jessica went through and the root cause analysis that we went through. Going back to the idea, well, in the situation that Jessica and I set up, well, we want to improve customer retention from 85 to 90%, the customer service team. So if we'd done a training mindset, the typical approach would have been to do customer service training, when what we needed was two solutions. We needed to reduce the caseload for the reps so they could engage in the right activity and the right performance, one, and two, we figured out the very specific root cause of the performance difference, and that was that our reps weren't good at building strategic relationships with decision makers. In other words, we found the performance gap. Now, think about what that does to the training and development that we deliver to Jessica's team. Instead of this one-size-fits-all sort of wash, rinse, repeat customer service training, we're now dialed in on really teaching people how to build strategic relationships with decision makers. Now what happens? Now we've moved the needle. Now we've found the right activity, the right performance to get where we want to get to. And, you know, for all the legitimate criticisms that can be made of the Kirkpatrick and Phillips methodology, there's still a lot to be learned by focusing on the upper levels, you know, the level 4 and level 5. You know, we can't stop just at utilization. Utilization is important. We want to make sure that our employees are participating, but we can't stop there. We want to make sure that we're getting good feedback from our employees as they're participating in the training, because we want to make sure that we have, you know, success stories that we can tell. We want to make sure the employees feel like they're learning something they can apply. We want to make sure that we understand that behaviors are changing, but ultimately we have to link what we're doing to business benefits. We can't stop at levels 1, 2, or 3. We have to tie it to business benefits, and that's really what Jennings is taking us to task for as a profession. Is we get caught up in too much, you know, in the training activity and not enough in where we need to be. And this is really illustrated here. This is written by Jack Phillips, coincidentally, How Executives View Learning Metrics. It was written by Patty and Jack Phillips and published in CLO magazine back in December of 2010. Now, this is an older article, and I'd love to find some more recent research. I haven't found anything better that explains this split between what organizations are actually measuring and what executives want to see. This is really great. So ranked on the left-hand side is the Forrest rank in this survey of what was important to the executives. And you can see impact and value, 1 and 2, and the learning evaluation model on the Phillips Kirkpatrick methodology, levels 4 and 5. But then you look on the far right, the number of organizations that are actually doing that, 8% compared to 4%. But look at activity. It's not on the Phillips Kirkpatrick, but 94% of organizations measure that. Reaction number 1, which is the first level, half of organizations measure that. I mean, but the executives don't care. It's not that important to them. What they want to know is what's the impact, what's the value, and we're not there. And organizations as a group are still not there. We need to get there. This is, you know, don't complain about not being invited to the C-suite until you find ways to prove value, and it is there. You are making a difference. There is no doubt in my mind, and there's no doubt in your mind either. I know that. We know we make a difference. We know that we are benefiting our employees and our colleagues in our organization. So what we have to do is step back from that and identify those behaviors that we see improving throughout our organization and find those business benefits, those business-driven metrics that we can point to that those behaviors are driving and say, aha, here we go. And that's how we're going to be able to prove this. We have to get into that mindset. So, you know, here are, I need training to do these things, increase revenue, improve quality, and the typical approach has been to look at training activities like this. Well, we're going to do sales training, we're going to do attention to detail, you know, improve morale, open access to online courses, we're going to satisfy customers, so we're going to do customer service training. That's the typical approach that we've taken. Again, not right, not wrong, and you know, maybe that's the right activity, maybe it's not, but when we start to think about really how am I going to prove that business benefit, start to ask yourself these sort of quantifying questions. All right, the business need is increased revenue. All right, well, by how much and in which areas? And then delve deeper. What is each team going to contribute, and what are the behaviors, the supporting behaviors are going to drive that, and what's the difference in current performance versus desired performance? And now you've got something to go work with. Improve quality. Well, improved how? How are we going to improve quality? What are the behaviors that are going to do that? Reduction in turnover. We'd like to do that. Well, by what percentage, and who's responsible for it, and what are they going to do? Improve morale. Well, we all like to have better, but how? What are we going to do? More satisfied customers in what way? How are we going to measure that? So business need, so that's what success will look like. And the quantifying questions, how will we know it? And once we can answer the how will we know it, we can begin to identify the supporting behaviors where our learning and development efforts can make an impact, and we can get to that Kirkpatrick and Phillips levels 4 and 5 and have a seat at that strategic level. Okay, so the fifth of the 5 barriers, manager support. No other relationship is repeated as often in your organization as the manager and direct report relationship. This is the relationship that is repeated over and over and over and over in your organization, and no other relationship has as much impact on so many areas: engagement, productivity, turnover, quality, profitability. This relationship is the single most important relationship in your organization, and it's repeated over and over and over. So this relationship becomes critical to the success of your organization. It's critical to the success of your training program. You need manager support at every single stage of your training and development programs, identifying performance gaps, helping work through what needs to be done. And you do that by explaining what's in it for them. Okay, Mr. Manager, if we help your team do better, how's this going to improve? If we improve the skills of the employees that work for you, it's going to make you look better. If we improve productivity levels, what's that going to do for you? Improved employee morale is going to help you buy. Improving your ability to recognize your employees will improve your team's performance. What's in it for the managers? That's what's critical. Jessica, you've put together this great email outreach plan. I'm going to let you talk through this because this is so good.
Yeah, so if you're thinking about, the beginning of the year can be a great time if you're looking to kind of relaunch, if you've launched a training program, or maybe you're looking to launch a new training program. It can be a great time to launch those things, so start planning now. But what I recommend is really looking at it 2 ways. So you could have a marketing communications plans targeted to your managers, and then one also targeted to the employee. So first, if you're looking to outreach to your managers, it's critical to get them on board. Chris gave us some reasons why. There's no other relationship that's more important. What are some of the key things that you need to include to get their attention? So first, why is this training initiative, or for example in this one, online learning, good for you and your employees? So spell it out to them. Why is it important? The other key element that you want to include is what are the benefits for you as a manager and supervisor. So you're going to save time, increase productivity, some of those key points that I've outlined there. And then finally, how do you support the employee to get the most out of your online training? So how do you support them? How do you make it most effective? What are some tools and resources that they can do and use to follow up with the employee after training takes place? So this is just an example, but the overall bigger picture is to think of it in two sets. So you need to communicate to your managers, and then you need to communicate to the employees, or give the managers resources to communicate to the employees.
Yeah, great stuff. Great stuff. Great practical examples, Jessica. And last but not least, this isn't a commonly referred to barrier to training, but a great way to seal the deal is make your employees stakeholders in what's going on in your organization. You know, focus on your organizational mission. Explain the why. You know, once employees understand why they're doing things, they're really good at executing. Focus on employee engagement. This gets back to your managers. Make sure everybody in your organization understands what really drives employee engagement, and give them the tools and resources they need to be successful. And this last piece, I cannot emphasize this one enough. Teach your managers the value and power of continuous feedback to employees. And it doesn't always have to be a pat on the back, but just to be engaged with your employees on a daily basis and have relationships that matter, so that the employees know that you're invested in their success. Okay, so key takeaways. Hopefully we've given you an idea that we need a different approach to learning and development with a focus on performance improvement. We've hopefully given you some ideas on the barriers to organizational factors, and really, if you want to make a big impact, start with manager support. It's the single most important factor, and it's a change in culture to drive this, and culture change isn't always easy, but if you start with your managers and build from there, you have a really good chance at success. Jessica, I'm going to turn the presentation over to you to wrap up, and I'll hit the question panel, and we've got time for some questions yet.
Super. So any questions, just send them over through the question panel. So some recommended resources for today's attendees. So I have 4 for today. This first one is a 4-part series. They're all short videos, less than 10 minutes in length. It builds on the idea of that root cause analysis, so how to know what we know. So you have all these great ideas throughout your organization. You have great processes, practices that could really be used to improve your overall organization or business, but nobody knows it. So this course will take you through some practical questions and steps to get better informed. This next course is a series as well. It's called Creating Great Business Video. This specific course includes some great data and research that you can use if you're building a business case for a new training initiative. So it explores some ideas about how employees learn today. So if you're looking to incorporate video-based training or online training, you can get some great data out of this course. There are 2 courses. So these are kind of like e-learning courses. The first one is a traditional e-learning course, so it's 60 minutes in length, but it kind of builds the basics. It gives you how to assess training needs, how to approach different activities, facilitation techniques, methods. It's actually a course that's designated to help you if you're studying for your PHR and SPHR certification exam. So that's a good e-learning course. And then the final one, this is a business challenge course. So it's about 15 minutes in length, but these are some of my favorite ones, so they're really interactive. It takes you through different scenarios and makes you make decisions based upon the information that you're fed. So you're given things like videos of a meeting or a telephone call or emails and things like that. So I recommend all of these resources. They're all included in the BizLibrary collection with more than 7,000 courses, both e-learning and video-based courses covering more than 25 topic areas. So if you want to try out any of the courses that I recommended or any other courses included in the collection, you're welcome to do so. I encourage you to try them out in a free 30-day trial. I'll just put up a poll throughout the question or Q&A period and just let us know. All right. So first question, I'll take Chris, unless there's one that you want to start with.
Well, we got a good one there from Alice, if you don't mind. Let's do that one.
Yep, cue from Alice. So she says, what's the recommended time for follow-up training for reevaluation of training?
Well, it's a really powerful question, and if you can get this right, you have a chance to really amplify the impact and effect of your entire employee development program, okay? So with that lead up, you'd think I would have a bright line answer. You do it this, this, and this. And unfortunately, there isn't a bright line answer. It's going to depend a little bit on your targeted audience and the content you're delivering, and the learning objectives. However, here's a good rule of thumb. Recommended time for follow-up should be while people are in the process of training. So let's use an online set of courses as an example. Let's say you're trying to improve listening skills, for instance, on a team, and you've assigned 3 or 4 courses and you've asked everybody to complete those within a month. The follow-up should begin immediately upon assignment of the courses with the manager, giving the manager the tools to ask questions and begin to, have some exercises to encourage learning during staff meetings while those courses are being taken. Okay, that's the first time for follow-up. It's while the training is actually going on. The second time would be sometime within 2 to 4 weeks after the courses have been assigned and they're supposed to have been completed, with some sort of follow-up content or some sort of follow-up exercise or activity to sort of reinforce the idea. In many ways, this is a marketing challenge. It's sort of keeping things top of mind. Hey, remember what you learned in your listening skills training? Give us an example of something you learned from listening to either a fellow employee or a client or a prospect this week. And you want to begin to do that on a regular basis. And then 90 days out, maybe some sort of an evaluation, compare, contrast. And of course, all along the spectrum here, from before the time you kick off the training, all the way for 90, 180 days out, what's the expected business impact? Are we trying to improve customer service, customer retention, whatever customer service scores? How are those doing? And you want to provide that feedback to employees all along the way so they can see progress. If you'll do those things, you have a good chance to make sure that not only is the training and development activity being participated in, but people are finding value in it and applying what they're learning.
All right, we are up on time, so I'm going to go ahead and wrap up for today. For those of you that are attending for HRCI credit, I put a link to the certificate in the chat panel on the right-hand side of your screen. You'll also receive a link to the webinar recording, slides, and completion certificate in an email that you should receive around 4 p.m. Central Time today. Upcoming webinars include, this week we have succession planning and the development of your high potentials, and next week learning content strategies for the age of YouTube and Facebook. So all of our upcoming webinars are on our website at bizlibrary.com/webinars. They're all free to attend and HRCI approved, so hopefully you'll join us for a future session. Again, thank you all for attending with us today. Thanks for all the questions, and thanks, Chris, for presenting.
Yeah, thank you all for spending some time with us today, and we hope to see you again soon.